Unless you've been living under a rock, you probably know that the World Cup is coming to North America this summer. And it's a big, massive event that marketers and sports marketers have been planning for many, many months. So we've got our favorite resident sports marketing expert here to help us break it all down, what the brands have been pouring into it, and whether they're going to be getting a big return off of it. Welcome to Marketing Brew Weekly. I'm Jenny Wynn, reporter at Marketing Brew.
I'm Kelsey Sutton, editor.
And I'm Alyssa Meyers, senior reporter. Let's get into it.
Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We were thinking about doing an episode about the World Cup, and we were like, well,
obviously,
Alyssa's been writing almost exclusively about the World Cup and also heated rivalry for the past several months.
Always.
So give us the quick overview if you know nothing about the World Cup. When is it happening? What's the big deal?
Yes, if you know nothing about the World Cup, some have called it the Super Bowl of soccer. It's a big deal. International tournament every 4 years. It's an even bigger deal for our sort of audience this year because it's in North America for the first time since 1994. 16 host cities, I think, across Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, which is also, I think, the most host cities that FIFA has ever done. So huge deal, huge audience. Obviously, marketers want to get involved, and that's why we're chatting about it.
Absolutely. And we have so much to discuss. But first,
are you out of breath trying to keep up with AI and all the changes it's constantly creating?
it can be exhausting, we know. That's why Morning Brew created a new podcast with PwC called The Intelligence Shift.
This 8-episode series focuses on how AI is changing and disrupting different industries. Topics span from the music industry's reckoning with AI to how HR is using AI to scout top talent.
An impressive roster of leaders joins host Dan Priest to discuss real stories and real lessons learned from AI.
If you're looking for trusted guidance about how to turn AI strategy into action, this show is for you.
Take a breather and learn from experts with experience. Listen to The Intelligence Shift wherever you get your podcasts. So first off, Alyssa, what's been going on in the World Cup brand world at large? We've got the longtime sponsors, we've got the new sponsors. So can you just give us a quick lay of the land?
Yeah, it's a really similar kind of setup to other big international tournaments, even Super Bowl, honestly, but think more Olympics. There's tiers of sponsors, right? So there are the big FIFA partners that have access to all the, assets that come along with the tournament. You can sponsor a national team. So U.S. Soccer Federation here, they're sort of the governing body for the men's and women's U.S. national soccer teams. Then there are the brands also that do, individual athlete sponsors. You can work with creators. You can do sort of campaigns around the World Cup without being an official FIFA sponsor or an official U.S. soccer partner. So tons of ways to get involved. Everyone wants to get involved somehow.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up that it's also on par with another international event, sports event like the Olympics, because we literally are in an Olympics year still. We just had the Olympics, so I think it is pretty crazy that we're having multiple global sports audiences in like a couple months apart. How have you seen that impact what people are talking about as you're talking to your sources about this?
It's a big deal, and I think it kind of depends on your brand, your budget. Obviously, I have heard some brands say, yeah, obviously you have to pick and choose. You don't have the budget for a Super Bowl ad, an Olympic sponsorship, a World Cup sponsorship. There are others that do. Like I think at least Michelob Ultra comes to mind where they have done a campaign and ad in all three of these events or are going to, and there's sort of a through line there. So there are some brands that are saying, okay, this is an opportunity to tell a bigger story throughout the year and sort of tie all these moments together. So I think ideally, like if you're a brand that has the budget for it, you want to activate at all these events. But yeah, there's a certain element of like, they offer different things, slightly different audiences, a different vibe. So some brands are picking one or two over the other.
Yeah.
I think something that's really interesting is that soccer popularity is growing slowly but steadily in the U.S., but it still does not hold a candle to something like football. But we also know that international audiences love soccer. It's a huge global sport, global event. So for some of these brands, I imagine there's this opportunity to reach people who you don't normally reach, right? Like people might be coming in to the U.S. Or to Canada or to Mexico to watch the sport, and then of course be exposed to the brand messages there in a way that maybe watching the Super Bowl, it's much more American, very different demographics. So I'm just wondering, like, I guess what you've kind of heard, Alyssa, in that realm, because I feel like the opportunity is both, it's like a growing sport and it's also like an extremely global sport. And I feel like that just like makes it a totally different kind of calculus.
Yeah, no, you're so right there, Kelsey. And I feel like there's a million directions we can go with that. I think one thing that comes to mind when we think about like that big international audience and brands obviously taking this as a reach play, like they know that this is going to be just absolutely massive. So many people are going to be watching it. I don't think anyone is like, hey, we're targeting 16 to 20-year-old women or like anything that specific. I think that shows up in the talent that you're going to see in World Cup ads. I can't think of a single like big ensemble one that has just American players or like American stars. A lot of brands tapped stars from, you know, other teams, other countries. So yeah, big range of talent. I think you're not just going to see like the U.S. men's soccer team in ads. I think maybe there's like the creator element comes in there too. But yeah, the accessibility is interesting. Like I kind of wonder what you guys think too about soccer in general and like soccer in the U.S. because I grew up playing and watching my whole life. So it's always been kind of big to me and accessible to me. But I do sometimes wonder like if it's getting more on the radar of other Americans.
Yeah, I feel like I did not grow up watching soccer. Like I'm not a huge soccer person at all, but I obviously am aware of the World Cup every 4 years as it happens. But with it being in North America and obviously several US host cities, I am more aware of it than ever. And I think that is a massive opportunity for brands that are like trying to potentially target someone like me that's like, oh, like I wouldn't normally pay attention to this, but I'm here and there's all this hype around it and I live in a host city. So it's like, it's easy to pull in new people that may not normally tune into the World Cup, but like it's happening and it's here and it's fun to be part of that hype. And I think there's more of those people than we might realize, even though, as you guys have said, soccer is a huge sport. The audience is global, and I think that strategizing around that, I imagine, must be like really fun and exciting, but also kind of stressful if you're used to something like the Super Bowl and like knowing your American audience, but then blowing it up is a huge opportunity, but then you have to think about all these different perspectives that you have to account for as well. So I wonder what it's like to sit in on some of these strategy meetings and be like, okay, well, everything that we're used to, let's blow it up for this specific event.
Yeah, something I think a lot about is I grew up playing soccer, but I did not watch a lot of soccer growing up. And my brother-in-law is a huge soccer person, played it and watches it. And one of the biggest hurdles I feel like for an American audience is like the time difference. Like if you're like, oh, I have to wake up at 6 a.m. to watch a match, like that's not like that kind of limits the accessibility. And of course the MLS plays here, but like the MLS is not known for like they've really made a lot of strides, but I think that is a huge brand opportunity for MLS to kind of capture the attention of American audiences who say like, I'm not a huge soccer person, but maybe I get a taste for it and I see why it's fun. I see why it's exciting. And the MLS says, we're better than we've been. We've got bigger players and players you might recognize from other leagues, et cetera. So I just think there's like a big branding opportunity. And I think we'll talk on that a little bit later. But Alyssa, I wanted to ask you about like, you mentioned creators, and I feel like part of like introducing a sport or getting people hooked is not just, hey, there's these matches, go to a host city and watch in person, but also like just be like have it consume your life for starting, later this month when it starts through July, right? And I think that creators really offer this opportunity for brands to, reach new audiences, younger audiences maybe play but don't watch. So what are you kind of seeing in that space? Like as we're seeing kind of these brands figure out what their World Cup strategy looks like.
Yeah, I think Jenny Mai was hitting on it too, actually, in terms of like the accessibility of the sport. That's a big part of the creator play. It's that the content that they make tends to be a little bit more fun, funny. Like it can be, how do you know what team or what player to root for based on your personality or something like that? That's more beginner level. It's not like, here's an analysis, a play-by-play of like how this player scored this goal or something like that. And then I think there's the element too, I've spoken to some marketers for brands and teams and leagues who say like, it's an international tournament, right? If you're a brand that's not only based in the US, or maybe you're not a US league, you're not MLS or NWSL, you want to reach a US audience or vice versa, you're looking to connect with communities all over the world, you as like one marketer or even one marketing team probably can't resonate with like every little subculture. That's where creators come in. Yeah. They know their audience, their space. They know how to talk about soccer in a way that's accessible to different smaller groups of people. I was talking a couple weeks ago with a soccer creator, Raheem Taylor Parks, about this. And he's a podcast host. He played soccer his whole life. He almost went pro. Really good player and an amazing content creator. He was hitting on that point about like how he makes it accessible. And I think we could hear from him actually a little bit.
Listen, the football's the global game, or soccer, as we say in America, is the global game. If you're really trying to reach an audience that goes from Africa to South America to the US to Asia and connects all these countries, you know, soccer's the number one sport to do that. And I recognized that early that, you know, if I wasn't going to be making it as a professional player, I could at least have an impact on the growth of the game from a cultural landscape. So when I look at Instagram and what I'm looking at within the space, I really like to look at what, you know, what's popular in media right now. How could I use my personality and basically implement what's going on in the culture, whether it's, you know, music, whether it's, you know, fashion, whether it's, you know, even funny things.
I love this, and I think it's making me think about how soccer, like a lot of sports, is like goes beyond the play itself. Mm-hmm. Like there are a lot of, Adidas put out a huge campaign, around soccer, which of course is targeted to athletes, but also maybe to somebody who just like wants a nice pair of sneakers to wear to a bar where they're going to watch a World Cup match. You know what I mean? Like there's these different kind of elements. I think I saw Paula's Choice is involved. And I feel like it's kind of mirroring a lot of what we talk about in sports marketing. There are brands that are very much not, Adidas obviously is very, very in it and has been in it for a long time. But I do not think, when I think of Paula's Choice, I don't think, the first place I imagine they're going to show up is for the World Cup. But they saw an opportunity. Yeah. So
the official skincare sponsor. I think it's really interesting because I think beauty brands in particular are getting more involved in sports at large. And with the World Cup being obviously a massive sporting event this year, yes, I wouldn't think that Paula's Choice specifically would get involved. But I'm not really surprised that beauty brands are getting involved. I think it speaks to what you're saying, Kelsey, and the creator that you spoke to, Alyssa, that was saying is that like, so much of the sport is not what's actually happening. It's the culture around it. And there are women audiences that are getting more and more into it. And there is like the thought of like, what are the players wearing on and off the field? And like skincare is an element of that. If you want to be protected from the sun while you're like playing, or what is your pregame routine? Like it makes sense that we're kind of expanding what can be involved in this event beyond what is just happening on the pitch itself.
I think it's like indicative of what we were talking about too, the sort of like space that soccer occupies in the cultural conversation in the US. I think those kind of non-endemic sponsorships like indicate, hey, this is becoming more of a cultural force. Like when you think about the cultural sports in the US, I think most people go basketball, like NBA, that's always been sneaker culture, like really shaping fashion, entertainment, music, driving that stuff, not just involved in it. Football, like it's kind of vibey. You have like fall football on a Sunday and you curl up and you put your jersey on and there's a fashion element to that. And obviously music and the Super Bowl inherently really connected. And I feel like partnerships like this, having a skincare brand, having more of like an Adidas lifestyle ad versus like, hey, Adidas boots, cleats, I think that shows actually that soccer is sort of coming up and on the rise in terms of not just people playing it and watching it, but it being part of American culture in a way that it hasn't been.
I think something that's really interesting too is that the World Cup is going to benefit in the U.S. from the fact that women's soccer is really historically very good. And I think that that's almost presents an opportunity for brands who are maybe not endemic or who maybe are looking at women's soccer opportunities and are saying, okay, what's this opportunity to expand our reach for this tournament as we kind of build out like like the women's sports and women's soccer play. I wonder about that dynamic a little. I don't know. Alyssa, do you think I'm totally off base here or not?
You're not. I could go on and on about this because it's such a complicated history with like U.S. soccer and pay equity, obviously. But I think I won't get into all that. I think it does go a little hand in hand with the sponsorship stuff, though, and where we stand now, because I believe that U.S. soccer sells, or this is just how the sponsorships are. There are rarely brands, if not any, that just sponsor like the men's national team. Usually it's a U.S. soccer or like a soccer federation, the whole thing. You sponsor the whole thing, which means you get access to the men's team and the women's team. And I feel like we're seeing that kind of play out in some of the ads. Like a lot of ads I've seen don't just have players from the U.S. men's national team. They have U.S. women's national team players too, or even retired players. I think that some of those women, especially from, you know, my jerseys, I think the 2019 World Cup team, 2015, like we have going back to the 90s, like women soccer players who are real stars that I think people can name their names in a way that you can't necessarily name American men. So yeah, I think we're seeing that show up in the ads, like the fact that the sponsorships are getting more equitable across the men's and women's teams, probably because the women's team has historically been so much better.
Yeah, that reminds me of a question that I feel like plagues like every sports event is, are you hearing at all in any of your conversations whether the performance of the men's national team actually matters in how brands are deciding whether they get involved?
I do ask that from time to time, like not just about soccer, we'll talk
it
about
applies to
any
everything.
sport.
Yeah.
I rarely hear any sponsor say like, yeah, we really care if this team or this player wins or does well. Obviously they love it. Like you get invested, you are literally investing money. So you want to root for the team or the player that you're sponsoring. But you know, it's really about the story. Like I think the ideal scenario for a lot of marketers is maybe that like they get in before the team is doing really well and then maybe they start performing better and you can say like, hey, you know, we've been in this, we've helped this story. So I think that that's kind of the expectation for the men this year. I don't think a lot of people expect them to make it that far. If they do, it would be like Cinderella story, obviously amazing.
And then that looks awesome for a brand that's involved at that point.
But I don't think any of the sponsors right now are like, oh yeah, like we need them to win or else we're not going to hit our KPIs.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about something like that being like ultimately a really long-term play for a brand getting involved, in contrast to something like just being involved with the World Cup at large. Like you kind of know what you're getting out of that, right? Like you know that it's going to be a big audience play. You're doing it for brand awareness. Whereas like if you're putting a little bit more investment into a specific team, like you're hoping in the long run that like a specific type of success happens there, which feels very different than just being like, we're here, we're part of this big event. Brand awareness is the big thing that we're going for. Yeah,
that's the other thing about a lot of those deals too, is that they're not, I mean, they're all multi-year, like I would say at least 4 years, if not 2, like you get because we have Women's World Cup coming up, like none of these brands that are FIFA sponsors or US soccer sponsors are in it for a year. They're in it for multi-year, if not like decade plus timelines.
Yeah. And I think being in it for the long haul means like different KPIs. You're thinking about like a different, and you have like more time to kind of build that relationship with brands. I wonder, something that I think is kind of interesting about the World Cup brand opportunity is that it's not just a very global international thing, which we talked about, but it also, because there are these host cities, there's this opportunity for brands to do something very local for people who are on the ground in those places. I wonder how that's kind of factoring in and what you're hearing, Alyssa, in terms of like taking advantage of the local culture, you know, in Philly or New York or Kansas City or Atlanta, any of these other places where there's going to be matchups and consequently, a lot of people from that area or visiting that area to attend those matches.
I think it's been a big deal, like sort of putting the local flavor on it for a number of reasons. I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is brands that are doing sort of like activating around some fan fests that are happening, which are usually, you know, near the stadium. They play the games, but it's not like you have to like buy a ticket to attend. And I think a lot of brands are showing up there because there's been a huge conversation, obviously, around affordability and accessibility for the World Cup this year. I mean, it's never been this expensive to get a World Cup ticket. I think it's a little, obviously, inflation, but I think it's a little bit also unique to North America hosting. And so, yeah, getting in on the ground floor, not only like with your logo in the stadium, I think has been extra important to brands because of that. And yeah, I mean, you want to like, I said, not just put your logo on it. You want to sort of like embrace the local flavor a little bit. And like Visa's been doing these sort of like art installations around host cities. And I think brands are looking for ways to show up in a way that says like, hey, we get this local culture, and also we're here even if we're not in the stadium, because you're all probably not in the stadium.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point, is that like, because of like the inaccessibility of tickets and actually getting in there, it reminds me of like when I was in college and like going to my school's football game was like, sure, you could go, but like if you were having a good enough time at the tailgates beforehand, like you would often just stay at the tailgates. And if you're a brand that's putting that on and you're creating a really good time and you have invested in like really doing the local scene really well, like what a good impression for someone to walk away from, especially if they never planned on going into the stadium, but they're like, I showed up, I was part of this huge crowd, I had a great time, and it was made possible because these brands decided to put on a really good event. I feel like it relates to what we talked about last week, Kelsey, about just like the power of like doing community events in general, and this is like a massive, massive community that is global but also local at the same time.
Yeah, and like soccer fandom, I think, is kind of known for being like very like people cry at soccer games and they're hugging. You know, it's like
the emotions are intense.
Yeah, the emotions are really heightened, and I think that there's an opportunity there. I do wonder, and I think this is something we'll all probably keep an eye on. There have been kind of conversations, some reporting about hotel bookings in some of the host cities. And it seems like it's a little down from what there were sort of expectations. Yeah. So I really do wonder what that's going to mean for some of these fan activations or various other things. Are people, maybe people are local and they're like, I can't afford a ticket, but I will go to this fan thing. That'll be fun. That opportunity for connection, or is, attendance down because, there's a whole host of reasons why people might not be maybe traveling in from abroad to go to various matches, et cetera. So I feel like that's a big question mark. Is that investment going to pay off? And really only time will tell. Like, we really won't know until we know.
I feel like sponsors might even be missing out there a little bit. Like I said, I've heard of some fan fest activations, but not every city has a fan fest. And I feel like I wish I was hearing more about watch parties at a local brewery or something like that. Like, I think that with soccer especially, that could be maybe an opportunity where you get more bang for your buck versus if you're doing a big, expensive official FIFA sponsorship and you're in the stadium, right? Because soccer I think of as like a butts in seats sport, I guess I would say. Like you were saying, Kelsey, like the fandom is so advanced, like they know the game really well. And when you go to a soccer game, I feel like most people, especially international soccer, go and they sit in their seat and they watch the whole game.
True.
You're not like tailgating, wandering around, getting some food. Like you're really locked in.
Like undivided attention.
Exactly. Which makes it hard for brands in the stadium. But maybe if you're in a more casual environment, like people would be more open to other messaging besides just what's on the pitch.
Yeah, especially for the more casual fan, perhaps just like going to hang out with their friends at the bar, at the watch party, whatever it is. Like it's not necessarily, if you're not in the stadium itself, like you might not be that person who is locked in that whole time. So that would be fun and an opportunity.
Yeah. I want to ask about kind of what comes after the World Cup. I'm getting ahead of myself. It hasn't even started yet, but this is a moment in time, and for brands who are doing multi-year deals, for leagues like MLS, for National Women's Soccer League, knowing that the Women's World Cup is also coming very soon. Like, how do brands take advantage of this moment and make it more than just a little bit of time on the calendar? What have you been hearing, Alyssa, in terms of like taking and bottling that energy and like spinning it out into something long tail?
This is also such a good question, like so much to say about it. And you are ahead of yourself and I'm ahead of myself too, because I've put that question to, I think, everyone, like league, team, brand wise that I've talked to in the past year. And there is a little bit of sense of like, okay, we're still thinking about the World Cup, but also I think almost everyone has said like, yes, of course, we're thinking long tail. I think part of it for the brands is these big multi-year deals. Like they're all saying, we're not in this for a year. We're in this through the Women's World Cup. We're in it through the next World Cup. Like it's a multi-year play. And I think more strategically, a lot of that has to do with the players. Like it's a lot about building the players up, especially for the domestic leagues. It's like, okay, who's going to be the breakout star of the World Cup? Where do they play domestically? Do we sort of emphasize that? How do we lift them up in the come out? Because, right, you watch them be a star on the international stage. you can watch them play in XYZ league rest of the year. I think brands are kind of trying to tap into that too with player partnerships.
I'm really curious about that because it's like the realistic take on this is that there's just not as many eyeballs on what's happening in soccer when it's not the World Cup. So how do you reckon with like investing so much and being in it for these multi-year contracts when it's like, okay, yes, it feels really, really good in this moment, but then like there's going to be a steep drop off as soon as the World Cup is actually over.
I think that's also where the creators come back into play. Yeah. I talked again to Raheem about this, and I think we can listen to him again answer that question.
Getting other people who aren't involved in soccer a part of the culture is the most important thing, and that's how it's going to live on beyond the World Cup, because you're right, like once that final whistle hits, what happens to soccer in America?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's such a good point, because I think one of the things you have talked to so many people about, Alyssa, is like getting in on the ground floor. And soccer is not ground floor in the US, but it certainly has a lot of room to grow. And I think for brands that are willing to kind of take that risk and make the bet that, you know, once some people are going to get a taste of going to a match and what it's like and the community and the experience and the fun and excitement. And if we get in early on that, like that gives us room to be part of the story of a building brand, you know, building a league, building a team, being there from the beginning, being by players' sides or creators' sides, like from the get-go. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that's an opportunity every marketer really craves.
I think that you said the creators coming back in is really interesting too. It's that if you can find the right story within the sports realm and then you find the right creator to tell that story and you can do that from the beginning, and it really like, it relies on that story being good. I think if you can maintain that attention and momentum through until the next big thing, that you kind of have the evidence that you've been there that whole time. And it's not just you being like, oh, now it's the World Cup again 4 years later. Remember when we were at the last World Cup? It's like there was someone along the way helping you remind everyone of your involvement on this like other medium that is constantly online and people are paying attention to.
That's when you see the returns, I think, right?
Yeah.
Is like if you can say, or not necessarily say, but show, like we've been with this athlete, they've been wearing us, using us, whatever, we've been sponsoring them throughout this whole journey, or, you know, we've been working with this creator, or all of this stuff together, you know, like we've been invested in soccer. There's a big grassroots element to it. A lot of soccer sponsors will build pitches and, you know, areas that they're not so easily accessible in. And, you know, there's a youth element. So I think that like the best long-term soccer sponsorships have a little bit of all of that, because that's when actually fans and consumers start to go like, okay, this is a soccer brand and I'm really thinking about them now, and maybe I will like actually have some goodwill or even purchasing intent in a few years.
The youth element is so fun too. It reminds me of in New York City. Did you guys see the thing about Zoran was like clearing out certain areas for like kids to play soccer in the streets because of the World Cup? Just so cute, and like maybe a brand opportunity for someone to get in there and be like, yes, we want the kids to have space to play soccer.
Yeah. I want to ask you guys, what is your favorite campaign that you've seen so far for the World Cup? Alyssa, I'm sure you have
You
thoughts.
have so many. Yeah.
I feel like this is like, I feel like I've been rizzing them up too much, honestly, but I really like the Michelob Ultra one. They do the same approach, like usually for a lot of their sports stuff, where they have like a big actor star or multiple, and then like a big cast. I think they had, you know, like Messi, they had Alex Morgan cameo in their ad for the World Cup. And it's like just this really fun kind of like quirky idea where like basically the plot is that a bunch of the national team players are like playing a little pickup match in the lobby of like a really fancy hotel. It's just like visually appealing, and I like that Alex Morgan cameos, and it's a fun one.
You know what, that reminds me of what one I really like, which is Adidas's. They put out like the short film, and it's kind of a pickup game, but it's like the local legends, and it's like, it's fun. I mean, I was like hooked. I was like, I want to watch this, and I want to watch a full-length movie of this.
You can make a little film out of it, then I'm in. As I said, I'm not a soccer girly, didn't grow up watching soccer, so I actually haven't seen that many ads. I have a pitch in my inbox right now about, I don't remember the brand off the top of my head. I know they're going to hate me for not remembering, but someone is partnering with the one of the actors from Ted Lasso, the one who was recently signed to a real-life team. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The guy who plays Danny Ross.
Yes. Yeah, so like he's involved, and I think anytime you can can bring in like a entertainment IP that is so naturally aligned, like I'm in. Like I'm a Ted Lasso fan, so I'm gonna be paying attention.
And that's like good marketing ultimately. Like we have to find out what the brand is.
I'm gonna go look it up after this. Yeah.
Visa has Jason Sudeikis too.
There you
Like
go.
as Jason
Of course.
Sudeikis, weirdly not as Ted Lasso.
Interesting.
But yeah, it was.
Honestly, anytime I see Jason Sudeikis now, I'm like Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso, yeah.
So it's working.
Yeah, where's the soccer ball?
Yeah, just bring out your jersey, give me a little whistle. It all makes sense, definitely. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. And if you want to tell us who you're rooting for, brand or team, send us an email at mkbw@morningbrew.com, which you can also find in the show notes. And we'll catch you next week.